Welcome, dear listener, to an enchanting journey through the myths of ancient Greece. 3 timeless tales that embody the enduring power of love, the trials of devotion, and the beauty of transformation. Tonight, we invite you to lose yourself in the legendary stories of the fall of Medusa, the love of Eros and Psyche, and the journey of Persephone. Each of these myths carries a unique lesson, offering a glimpse into the hearts of gods and mortals alike. Medusa's tale is one of transformation, sorrow, and empowerment. How even the darkest curses can forge resilience and strength. The love story of Eros and Psyche speaks of trust and perseverance, showing how love can overcome even the most daunting trials. Finally, the journey of Persephone explores themes of renewal and duality, weaving a tale of love, sacrifice, and the balance between life's light and shadow. Settle in, let your mind drift, and allow the whispers of ancient Greece to guide you through these enduring tales. Picture the golden glow of a setting sun upon marble temples, the scent of wildflowers carried on the breeze, and the gentle murmur of waves meeting rocky shores. You are about to embark on a journey that transcends time, a journey into the depths of myth and legend, revealing the beauty, trials, and triumphs of the human spirit. Before we begin, imagine yourself standing at the edge of a lush meadow, the grass swaying gently in the breeze, kissed by the golden rays of a setting sun. The sky above is painted in hues of lavender and amber, the last light of day merging with the softening blues of twilight. To your right, a marble temple stands, its columns worn by time but still proud, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. The statues that line the temple's entrance seem almost alive, their expressions carved with both grace and sorrow, as if they too bear witness to the tales of gods and mortals. The gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of a nightingale create a serene symphony, inviting you to step further into this timeless realm. As the sky darkens, a soft mist begins to rise from the earth, swirling around your feet and transforming the meadow into a dreamscape. The world around you seems to blur, the line between reality and myth dissolving as you are drawn deeper into the enchantment of this ancient land. This is a world where myths come alive, where love and sacrifice are written in the stars, and where the boundary between the mortal and the divine is as thin as a whisper. And now let us begin with our first tale, the story of Medusa, a tale of beauty, betrayal, and rebirth. The Curse of Medusa. Chapter 1. Medusa was once a mortal maiden of remarkable grace, her beauty captivating the hearts of all who gazed upon her. She served as a priestess in Athena's temple, dedicated to the goddess of wisdom and war. Her golden hair flowed like a river of sunlight, her eyes were the color of the azure sky, and her laughter, soft and musical, filled the air of the temple. She was admired not only for her appearance, but also for her devotion to Athena. It was this devotion that made Medusa stand out from the other priestesses. She took her vows seriously, honoring the sanctity of Athena's temple with a purity that few could match. Every morning she woke before the sun, lighting incense and making offerings in reverence. She prayed for wisdom, for guidance, and for the strength to serve the goddess faithfully. Her piety and dedication were known far and wide, and the temple flourished under her care. Visitors to the temple spoke of her gentleness, her kindness to those who came seeking Athena's favor, and her unwavering faith. She would listen to the worries of those who prayed, offering them words of comfort, her presence a beacon of hope. But her radiance did not go unnoticed by the gods, whose attentions would ultimately change her life forever. Whispers of her beauty reached the highest peaks of Mount Olympus. Many suitors, both mortal and divine, sought her hand, but Medusa remained steadfast in her devotion to Athena. She had pledged herself to the goddess, vowing to remain chaste and pure, a promise she intended to keep. Yet it was her very purity and beauty that would draw the unwanted gaze of a powerful god, setting into motion a series of events that would shatter her world. Chapter 2. Among those whose gaze lingered upon Medusa was Poseidon, the god of the sea. Poseidon's curiosity turned to obsession as he watched Medusa from afar. Her beauty was unlike anything he had seen, a mortal with an ethereal allure that seemed otherworldly. He decided that he must have her, no matter the cost. Poseidon, lord of the sea, was known for his tempestuous nature. His power was vast, his will unyielding, and when he desired something, he would not be denied. He watched Medusa as she went about her duties, her laughter echoing through the temple halls, her grace captivating all who beheld her. The more he watched, the more his desire grew, until it consumed him. One fateful evening, as the waves of the sea whispered secrets along the shore, Poseidon approached Athena's temple. Medusa was alone, tending to the sacred altar. The moonlight filtered through the high windows, casting an otherworldly glow upon her as she arranged the offerings. The scent of incense filled the air, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the marble floors. When she saw Poseidon enter, a shiver of fear ran down her spine. His eyes bore into hers with an intensity that made her feel vulnerable, as if the temple walls no longer offered her protection. "What brings you here, Lord Poseidon?" Medusa asked, her voice trembling as she turned her gaze to the altar, attempting to avoid his penetrating stare. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of his presence pressing down on her. Her heart pounded in her chest, a sense of dread washing over her. Poseidon did not answer in words. Instead, he moved towards her, his intentions clear. Medusa tried to resist, to escape his grasp, but Poseidon was relentless. She called out for Athena, her voice echoing in desperation through the empty temple. But the goddess did not intervene, and Medusa's cries were swallowed by the night. Poseidon's power was overwhelming, his will unyielding, and in that moment Medusa felt her world crumble. The sacred space she had dedicated her life to was violated, and she was left powerless to stop it. The goddess Athena, guardian of her temple, saw what was happening, her fury growing as she witnessed the desecration of her sacred space. The violation of her temple was an affront she could not ignore, and her anger burned like the fires of Olympus. Yet her wrath was not directed at Poseidon, whose power rivaled her own, but at Medusa, the mortal whose beauty had drawn the god's attention. Chapter 3. The moment Poseidon left, Medusa crumbled to the temple floor, her sobs echoing in the empty hall. She felt the sacredness of her devotion tarnished and broken. Her heart ached with the weight of what had been stolen from her, the violation that left her feeling powerless and defiled. She clutched the altar, her tears falling onto the cold marble, her prayers now filled with anguish and despair. But Medusa was not the only one enraged. Athena, watching from the heavens, seethed with anger, not at Poseidon, whom she could not punish, but at Medusa, whose mere presence had brought this violation to her temple. In Athena's eyes, Medusa had failed in her duties, allowing the sanctity of her sacred space to be defiled. In a blaze of divine light, Athena appeared before Medusa, her face cold and unforgiving. The air crackled with energy, the scent of ozone filling the room as the goddess manifested. Her eyes, usually filled with wisdom, were now sharp with fury, her presence commanding and terrifying. "You have defiled my temple," Athena declared, her voice echoing through the marble halls. Medusa looked up, her eyes swollen with tears. "I did not want this, my goddess. I did nothing to invite Poseidon's attention." Her voice was barely a whisper, her body trembling as she knelt before the goddess. But Athena was unmoved. "You have brought shame upon my sacred grounds," she continued, her voice hard as stone. "For this you shall be punished. The beauty that has caused your downfall will become a curse to others. No one shall look upon you with desire again." Athena raised her hand, and a powerful light engulfed Medusa. Her golden hair twisted into serpents, hissing and writhing around her head. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, became piercing and cold, capable of turning any who dared meet her gaze into stone. Medusa's scream of agony filled the temple as her body was transformed, her beauty becoming a monstrous visage. The pain was unbearable, her body contorting as the curse took hold, her mind filled with the cries of the serpents that now adorned her head. When the light faded, Medusa was no longer the beautiful maiden she had once been. Her reflection in the polished marble showed a monstrous form, her hair a writhing mass of serpents, her eyes filled with a deadly power. She fell to the ground, her heart breaking as she realized what she had become. The temple, once her sanctuary, now felt like a prison, the weight of Athena's curse pressing down on her. Chapter 4. When Medusa opened her eyes, she found herself in a place unfamiliar to her. The temple of Athena was gone, replaced by the desolate landscape of a rocky island. The air was heavy with salt, and the waves crashed violently against the jagged cliffs that surrounded her. The sky was overcast, the sun hidden behind thick clouds, casting a dull light over the barren land. Alone, she could feel the presence of the serpents atop her head, their bodies coiling and uncoiling in rhythm with her ragged breaths. She could hear their whispers, a strange language that only she could understand. Days turned into weeks, and Medusa adjusted to her isolation. She explored the island, discovering hidden caves and secluded coves where she could find some semblance of peace. The island was harsh and unforgiving, the rocky terrain difficult to navigate, but Medusa learned to adapt. She found a cave near the cliffs that overlooked the sea, a place where she could rest, sheltered from the harsh winds. She would sit at the edge of the cliff, watching the waves crash against the rocks below, the endless expanse of the sea stretching out before her. The few who dared to come upon her island, warriors seeking glory or fools chasing legends, met a swift end. Each time she inadvertently turned someone to stone, her heart broke a little more, the weight of her curse pulling her further into despair. She had never asked for any of this, not for Poseidon's gaze, not for Athena's wrath, and certainly not for the monstrous existence she now led. The statues of those who had come for her littered the island, silent reminders of her power and her isolation. But amidst the solitude, Medusa also discovered a strange new power. She found herself speaking to the serpents, her only companions, and learned to embrace their presence. The once foreign language of their whispers became her own, and through it she began to see the world differently, not just as a victim, but as something transformed, capable of both destruction and protection. The serpents spoke to her of the world beyond the island, of the gods and mortals who lived their lives unaware of her suffering. Their voices, though harsh, were a source of comfort, a reminder that she was not entirely alone. The serpents, though feared by others, became her allies. They warned her of intruders, their hisses alerting her to danger long before she could see or hear it herself. She began to see her transformation not only as a curse, but as a means of survival. Her island, once a prison, became her domain, a place where she held power, where she could protect herself from those who sought to harm her. She learned to navigate the rocky terrain with ease, her senses heightened by the presence of the serpents. She was no longer the helpless maiden she had once been. She was something more, something powerful. Chapter 5. Years passed, and Medusa became the guardian of her island, her presence turning it into a place of both fear and mystery. The statues of those who had come for her lined the rocky shores, their faces frozen in expressions of fear and awe. It was during one such solitary night, as the moon hung high in the sky, that she sensed a new presence, one unlike the others who had come before. This visitor was stealthier, moving silently through the shadows. The serpents atop her head stirred, their hisses growing louder, warning her of the intruder. Perseus, a young hero on a quest to save his mother, had been tasked with bringing back Medusa's head by King Polydectes. Armed with gifts from the gods, a mirrored shield from Athena, winged sandals from Hermes, and a sword forged by Hephaestus, he approached Medusa's lair with caution. He had heard the tales of the monstrous Gorgon, of her power to turn men to stone with a single glance, and he knew that he had to be careful. Medusa, though aware of his presence, felt no malice towards him. She had come to accept her fate, to understand that her end might come at the hands of someone like Perseus, a hero driven by love and duty. She could sense his determination, the resolve in his heart, as he moved closer to her lair. As Perseus entered her chamber, he used the mirrored shield to avoid her gaze, his steps silent as he approached. The shield reflected the moonlight, casting a soft glow across the chamber, illuminating the statues that stood as silent witnesses to her torment. The serpents on Medusa's head hissed, warning her, but she did not move. She watched through her reflection in the shield, her eyes meeting Perseus's in the glass. In that brief moment, she saw not hatred, but sorrow in his eyes, a reflection of her own pain. She closed her eyes, accepting her fate. There was a strange sense of peace that settled over her, a feeling that perhaps, finally, her suffering would come to an end. With one swift motion, Perseus brought down his sword, and Medusa's head was severed from her body. The serpents fell silent, and the once monstrous visage was forever frozen in an expression of peace. Her body crumpled to the ground, the chamber falling silent, the weight of her curse lifted at last. Chapter 6. Perseus carefully placed Medusa's head into a bag, knowing its power would still serve him. As he left the island, he felt a strange sense of reverence for the woman who had been cursed, for something beyond her control. He vowed to use her power not for glory, but to protect those he loved. The winged sandals carried him across the sea, the island of Medusa fading into the distance, the statues of her victims standing as eternal guardians of her memory. And so Medusa's legacy lived on, not just as a monster but as a protector. Her head, though severed, became a symbol of both fear and protection. Perseus used it to save his mother and defeat his enemies, and eventually he offered it to Athena, who placed it upon her shield, the Aegis, where Medusa's power would protect the goddess and those she favored. The image of Medusa, her eyes still filled with the power to turn men to stone, became a symbol of Athena's strength, a reminder of the consequences of defiling the sacred. The story of Medusa spread far and wide, her name becoming both a cautionary tale and a symbol of resilience. Those who heard of her fate spoke of the cruelty of the gods, of the injustice that had been done to her. but they also spoke of her strength, of the power she wielded even in death. Medusa, the once beautiful maiden, had become something far more. She had become a legend. Her story was told by the fireside, a tale of beauty, betrayal, and the strength that lay hidden within even the most cursed of souls. And thus, dear listener, we journey onward to the tale of Persephone, a story woven with threads of hope and ambition, and the delicate balance between light and darkness. The love of Eros and Psyche. Chapter 1. In a kingdom far away there lived a young princess named Psyche, whose beauty was so profound that people from distant lands journeyed to gaze upon her. Her eyes were like deep pools of twilight, her hair flowed like silken rivers, and her smile seemed to hold the very essence of dawn. So stunning was her beauty that whispers began to spread, whispers that Psyche was the incarnation of Aphrodite herself. Temples dedicated to the goddess of love and beauty grew neglected as mortals turned their adoration to Psyche instead. Offerings meant for Aphrodite were instead left at Psyche's feet. Though Psyche had never sought such devotion, it came to her like waves to the shore, unbidden and unstoppable. And as word of Psyche's beauty grew, Aphrodite's jealousy stirred, her envy igniting like a flame. One evening, Aphrodite stood before her mirror, her reflection full of wrath. "They forget me," she said, her voice a simmering rage. "They forget the goddess of beauty for a mere mortal." Her heart filled with vengeful intent, she turned to her son, Eros, the god of desire and love. "My son," Aphrodite called, her tone softening, like honey covering a sharp blade. "I have a task for you. This mortal, Psyche, has become too beloved. I need you to make her fall in love with the most hideous creature you can find. Let her suffer for her beauty." Eros hesitated, his mother's request echoing in his mind. He had seen mortals fall in love many times, had watched them stumble and rejoice in the throes of passion. To cause someone the agony of misplaced love felt cruel, but he could not defy his mother. He took his bow and arrows, preparing to fulfill her wish. Chapter 2. Under the cover of night, Eros descended upon Psyche's chamber. He moved as silently as a breath, his wings barely stirring the air. There she lay, bathed in the pale glow of moonlight, her face serene in sleep. Eros approached, his bow in hand, ready to carry out Aphrodite's command. Yet, as he gazed at Psyche, something within him shifted. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was something more, an innocence, a vulnerability, that touched the god of love. He felt his heart beat faster, his resolve faltering. When he leaned closer, intending to prick her with his enchanted arrow, his own hand slipped, the arrow grazing his skin instead. Eros gasped, feeling the magic rush through him, a warmth that filled his entire being. He stumbled back, his gaze locked on Psyche, and he realized, with a suddenness that took his breath away, that he had fallen in love with her. His mission forgotten, Eros fled, his heart pounding, his mind racing with thoughts of the mortal who had ensnared him. Chapter 3. Meanwhile, Psyche's beauty, though admired, brought her no happiness. Her sisters had both married noblemen, and yet Psyche remained alone. No suitor dared approach her, believing her too perfect, too ethereal to be wed. Psyche's parents grew desperate, seeking guidance from the oracle of Delphi. The oracle's voice echoed through the temple, its words filling Psyche's parents with dread. "The daughter of beauty shall not marry a mortal man. She is destined for a creature feared by even the gods. Take her to the mountain peak, and there she shall meet her husband, a monstrous being who awaits her." Psyche's heart sank as her parents tearfully relayed the prophecy. Though fear gripped her, she knew she could not defy the will of the gods. With courage born of resignation, Psyche allowed herself to be led to the mountain, her family weeping as they left her alone on the cold, wind-swept peak. Psyche stood there, her eyes closed as the wind howled around her, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She felt the ground beneath her feet tremble, and suddenly she was lifted, carried by an unseen force, gentle and warm. The fear she expected did not come. Instead, she felt a strange calm as she drifted into unconsciousness. Chapter 4. Psyche awoke in a place unlike any she had ever seen. She was lying on a bed of the softest down, silken curtains swaying gently in the breeze. The air was filled with the scent of jasmine, and as she rose, she saw that she was in a grand palace, its walls made of shimmering gold and silver, its floors covered in lush carpets. A voice spoke to her, disembodied but kind. "Welcome, Psyche. All of this is yours. You are safe here." "Who are you?" Psyche called, her voice trembling. "Where am I?" The voice did not answer her questions directly. "All you see is yours, and you need fear nothing. Rest and enjoy the gifts before you." Though confusion filled her mind, Psyche could feel no malice. She wandered through the palace, marveling at its beauty, at the gardens filled with flowers that seemed to glow, the fountains that bubbled with crystal-clear water. Each night, her mysterious husband came to her, always cloaked in darkness. He spoke to her with tenderness, his words gentle and filled with love, but he never allowed her to see his face. Psyche found herself captivated by the splendor of the palace and by the gentle affection of her unseen husband. She spent her days exploring the vast halls, discovering rooms filled with treasures beyond imagination, gilded statues, jewels of every hue, and music that seemed to play itself. The palace was alive with magic, and though she was alone during the day, she felt as though she were in the company of countless unseen hands that cared for her. Chapter 5. Over time, Psyche grew accustomed to her new life. Her unseen husband treated her with a kindness she had never known, his voice a comforting presence in the darkness. She found herself falling in love with him, despite never having seen his face. His laughter filled her with warmth, his touch gentle and reassuring. One night, as they lay together, Psyche spoke, her voice soft. "Why must you hide from me? Why can I not see your face?" Her husband sighed, the sound filled with sadness. "My beloved Psyche, you must trust me. There are forces that would see us torn apart if my identity were revealed. Trust in my love and know that I will always protect you." Psyche nodded, though doubt tugged at her heart. She loved him, but the mystery of his identity gnawed at her. She longed to look into his eyes, to see the face of the man who had captured her heart. Despite her longing, Psyche chose to trust her husband. Their love grew deeper, and the nights they spent together became more precious. He would tell her stories of the gods and the stars, and she would listen, enraptured by the rich timbre of his voice. She learned to discern his emotions through his words, the way his laughter carried joy, or how his silences spoke of sadness. Their bond became one of unspoken understanding, an intimacy forged in the darkness of their shared nights. Chapter 6. Psyche's life of luxury continued, but she missed her family. Her husband, seeing her sadness, allowed her sisters to visit. When they arrived, they were astonished at the opulence that surrounded Psyche. at the beauty of her palace and the richness of her attire. But as they spoke, jealousy began to take root in their heart. They whispered to Psyche, their words dripping with doubt. "Why have you never seen your husband? How do you know he is not a monster, hiding his true form from you?" Psyche's heart wavered, her sister's words planting seeds of fear. That night, as her husband lay sleeping beside her, Psyche took a lamp and held it over him, her hand trembling. The light revealed not a monster, but a young man of breathtaking beauty, Eros, the god of love himself. Psyche gasped, her hand shaking, and a drop of hot oil fell from the lamp, landing on Eros's shoulder. He awoke with a start, his eyes wide with pain and betrayal. "Psyche, what have you done?" he whispered, his voice filled with sorrow. "I asked only for your trust, and now you have broken it." Before Psyche could speak, Eros spread his wings and flew from the palace, leaving Psyche alone, her heart shattered. Chapter 7. Psyche, heartbroken and determined to find her love, wandered the earth in search of Eros. She knew that she had wronged him, that her lack of trust had driven him away. She was willing to do anything to win him back, even face the wrath of his mother, Aphrodite. Aphrodite, upon learning of Psyche's betrayal, was furious. She appeared before Psyche, her beauty cold and her eyes filled with disdain. "You dare to love my son? You, a mere mortal, think yourself worthy of a god." Psyche knelt before the goddess, her eyes filled with tears. "Please, goddess, let me prove myself. I love Eros with all my heart. I will do anything to earn your forgiveness." Aphrodite sneered, her lips curving into a cruel smile. "Very well, mortal. If you wish to prove yourself, you must complete a series of tasks. Fail, and you shall never see Eros again." Psyche nodded, determination filling her heart. She would endure whatever trials Aphrodite set before her, no matter the cost. Chapter 8. Aphrodite set Psyche 4 seemingly impossible tasks, each more difficult than the last. First, she was to sort an enormous pile of mixed grains, barley, millet, poppy seeds, lentils and beans, by dawn. Psyche stared at the heap, despair washing over her. But as she began to weep, a host of ants appeared, swarming over the pile and sorting each grain with precision. The next task was to gather golden fleece from a herd of fierce rams. Psyche approached the riverbank where the rams grazed, their golden wool shining in the sun. She knew she could not face them directly, for they were dangerous. As she sat by the river, a reed whispered to her, "Wait until the rams rest in the shade, then gather the wool that clings to the branches." Psyche did as the reed advised, and soon she had the golden fleece Aphrodite demanded. The third task was to collect water from the river Styx, a task that seemed impossible. The river flowed between treacherous cliffs, its waters guarded by serpents. As Psyche despaired, Zeus sent his eagle to help her. The eagle swooped down, taking the crystal vial from Psyche's hands and filling it with the dark waters of the Styx. The final task was the most dangerous of all. Aphrodite commanded Psyche to descend into the underworld and retrieve a box containing a fragment of Persephone's beauty. Psyche, knowing the peril, resolved to face it regardless. She journeyed to the edge of the underworld, prepared to give her life for love. The journey to complete these tasks tested Psyche in every possible way. The ants, the reed, and the eagle were all signs that she was not alone, that the gods themselves saw her struggle and offered their silent support. With each task, Psyche grew stronger, her love for Eros giving her the courage to face dangers that would have broken others. She knew she had to prove herself, not just to Aphrodite, but to herself, that her love was worth every trial. Chapter 9. Psyche's journey to the underworld was fraught with danger. She approached the gates of Hades with a heart heavy with fear, yet resolute in her purpose. She offered a coin to Charon, the ferryman, to carry her across the river Styx, and a honeyed cake to appease Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of the underworld. The underworld was a place of perpetual twilight, where shadows stretched endlessly, and the air was thick with sorrow. Psyche walked through the dim landscape, her footsteps echoing on the cold ground. Souls of the dead drifted past her, whispering of forgotten lives, their voices barely audible. When Psyche reached Persephone's palace, the queen of the underworld welcomed her, her expression gentle. "Why have you come, mortal?" Persephone asked, her voice echoing softly. "Great queen," Psyche said, bowing deeply, "I have come to request a fragment of your beauty to take back to Aphrodite." Persephone regarded her for a long moment before nodding. She handed Psyche a box, its weight surprisingly light. "Take this, but remember, do not open it." Psyche thanked Persephone and began her journey back, her heart filled with hope. She had faced the darkness of the underworld and survived, and now she would return to Aphrodite, her tasks complete. As Psyche walked back through the underworld, she could not help but feel a strange kinship with the souls around her. They were bound to this place, just as she was bound to her love for Eros. The journey back was arduous, and there were moments when she nearly stumbled, but she held on to the thought of Eros, the way his voice had filled her with warmth, the memory of his touch. Chapter 10. As Psyche neared the end of her journey, curiosity began to gnaw at her. She wondered what Persephone's beauty looked like, what it was that could make even a goddess more lovely. Against her better judgment, Psyche opened the box, hoping to take just a glimpse. But instead of beauty, an overwhelming darkness poured out, a sleep like death that enveloped her. Psyche fell to the ground, her body limp, her eyes closed as the deep sleep took hold of her. Eros, who had been watching from afar, could bear it no longer. He flew to Psyche, his heart aching at the sight of her still form. He leaned down, brushing his lips against hers, and as he did, the dark sleep lifted, her eyes fluttering open. "Psyche," Eros whispered, his voice filled with love. "You have suffered so much for me. I cannot bear to be apart from you any longer." Psyche looked up at him, tears filling her eyes. "Eros, I'm so sorry. I never meant to doubt you. I love you more than anything." Eros gathered her in his arms, his wings wrapping around her. "I know, my love. And now we shall never be parted again." Eros carried Psyche to Olympus, where he pleaded with Zeus to allow their union. Zeus, moved by their love, granted Psyche immortality, making her a goddess so she could be with Eros forever. Aphrodite, seeing the depth of their love and the lengths Psyche had gone to prove herself, relented, her jealousy giving way to acceptance. And so Psyche and Eros were wed, their love celebrated by gods and mortals alike. Together they became a symbol of the power of love, a love that could overcome any obstacle, bridge any divide, and bring even a mortal to the realm of the gods. Their love story was told across Olympus, and even Aphrodite, who had once sought to keep them apart, found herself smiling at their devotion. She saw that Psyche's trials had only strengthened her, that her love for Eros was unbreakable, forged in the fires of hardship and sacrifice. Their story became a tale told across generations, a reminder of the trials that love could endure and the beauty that could be found in trust and devotion. And as Psyche and Eros looked down from Olympus, they knew that their journey had reached its culmination, a love that overcame every trial and now shone brightly for all to see, eternal and unbroken. May their story inspire us all, reminding us that true love conquers all, even the mightiest challenges. And so, dear listener, remember that love is not without its trials, but it is in facing those trials that love finds its true strength. Stay and hear the stories yet to be told, the tales of gods, mortals, and the love that binds them in a cycle as eternal as the stars themselves. The end. The Journey of Persephone. Chapter 1. Persephone ran through the fields of Enna, her laughter ringing like bells as she gathered wildflowers. The meadow spread before her, a colourful blanket of yellows, blues, and pinks, swaying in the gentle breeze. Her mother, Demeter, watched from a distance, her heart swelling with love and pride. "Persephone, dear," Demeter called, her voice a warm reminder of home. "Don't wander too far. The sun is already lowering." "Just a little longer, mother," Persephone replied, a smile lighting her face as she knelt to weave a crown from daffodils. The bright petals seemed to glow in the golden rays of the setting sun. Demeter sighed, her smile tinged with a hint of worry. She had always been protective of her daughter, knowing full well the risks of a world filled with gods and their whims. Still, seeing Persephone so carefree, Demeter couldn't bring herself to call her back. But the earth beneath Persephone's feet trembled slightly, as if waking from a long slumber. Unbeknownst to her, someone was watching, someone whose eyes had been drawn to her radiance from the depths of the underworld. Chapter 2. Hades, ruler of the underworld, had grown lonely in his dark domain. When he first glimpsed Persephone, her beauty had struck him like the brightest of flames in his dim kingdom. She was life incarnate, a burst of joy that filled him with longing. He knew he needed her by his side. One fateful day, as Persephone bent to pluck a particularly vibrant bloom, the earth split open beneath her. She gasped, struggling to hold on to the flowers she had picked, but they scattered across the ground as the chasm widened. Hades emerged in his obsidian chariot, drawn by pitch-black horses, and swept Persephone into his arms. Persephone's screams echoed through the valley, fading into silence as she disappeared into the dark fissure. Demeter, hearing her daughter's cry, rushed to the meadow, her eyes wide with panic. But she found only the scattered flowers and the empty breeze, the sun setting on an empty field. Chapter 3. Hades carried Persephone down into his world, the flickering torches illuminating the darkened halls of his palace. He gently set her on her feet, his eyes searching hers. "Why have you taken me?" Persephone's voice shook as she backed away, her heart pounding. "Do not fear, Persephone," Hades said softly, though his presence filled the room like a shadow. "I wished only for a companion, someone to bring light to my dark realm." Persephone shivered. "I want to return to my mother." "She will be worried." Hades looked at her, his face conflicted. He had long lived in solitude, and the thought of letting Persephone go filled him with dread. "Stay with me, just for a while," he implored. "Let me show you there is beauty here, even in the underworld." Persephone looked around, the dark walls closing in, and felt her heart ache. But something in Hades' voice, a hint of loneliness perhaps, made her pause. Days turned into weeks, and Hades did his best to make Persephone feel comfortable. He showed her the hidden corners of his realm, the gardens that bloomed in pale light, the rivers that shimmered like glass. There was a strange beauty in the underworld, one that Persephone had never imagined. "See, even here, life finds a way," Hades said one day, his voice gentle as he pointed to a small white flower growing between the rocks. Persephone knelt to touch the petals, a smile tugging at her lips. "I suppose it does," she said softly. Chapter 4. Demeter searched tirelessly for her daughter. She wandered from village to village, from forest to mountain, asking every creature she met if they had seen Persephone. She spoke to the rivers, the winds, and even the stars, but no one had answers. Days turned into weeks, and Demeter's despair grew. She began to neglect her duties as the goddess of harvest, and soon the fields dried, crops withered, and the earth grew cold. The once flourishing world fell into a barren silence. "Persephone," Demeter whispered, tears rolling down her face as she stood in a desolate field. "Where are you, my child?" The cries of the starving reached the ears of Zeus, the king of the gods. He watched the suffering of the mortals, and his heart grew heavy. Something had to be done. Demeter's sorrow was not just her own, it spread across the world, affecting everyone. The animals grew weak, the rivers ran dry, and even the flowers lost their color. The once vibrant world was now a shadow of itself, and Zeus knew he could not ignore it any longer. Chapter 5. Zeus sent Hermes, the swift-footed messenger, down to the underworld to speak with Hades. Hermes moved like a breeze through the darkened passages, finding Hades seated on his obsidian throne, with Persephone by his side. "Hades," Hermes said, his voice echoing, "Zeus commands you to return Persephone. The earth suffers in her absence, and Demeter will not relent until her daughter is restored." Hades glanced at Persephone, her eyes downcast as she listened. His heart ached, but he knew he could not keep her against her will, not when the world above was dying because of it. "If she wishes to go, I will not stop her," Hades said, his voice low. He turned to Persephone, his gaze softening. "Do you wish to leave, Persephone?" Persephone looked at him, then at Hermes. Her heart longed for her mother, for the bright fields of Enna, but a part of her, a small, strange part, felt a pull towards Hades, towards the quiet strength in his eyes. "I wish to see my mother," she finally said. "But I will return if I must." Hades nodded, a sadness settling over him. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing against hers. "I understand," he whispered. "I only ask that you remember this place and the time we have shared." Chapter 6. Hades led Persephone to the palace garden, where a solitary pomegranate tree grew, its branches heavy with fruit. He plucked a pomegranate and handed it to her. "Before you leave, take this," Hades said, his voice filled with a mix of hope and sorrow. "Taste of its seeds, and you will always have a part of this place with you." Persephone hesitated, then nodded. She took the fruit and bit into it, the juice staining her lips as she swallowed 6 seeds. She didn't know the magic that bound her now, a bond that would bring her back to the underworld for part of every year. Hades looked at her, his heart heavy but resolute. "Go to your mother, Persephone, and remember, you will always be welcomed here." Persephone looked at him, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Hades," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I will not forget." Chapter 7. Hermes led Persephone up from the underworld, and they emerged from the earth into the bright world above. Demeter, sensing her daughter's return, rushed to meet them, her eyes wide with tears of joy. "Persephone!" Demeter cried, embracing her daughter tightly. "My dear child, I have searched for you everywhere." "Mother," Persephone whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I am here now. I am safe." Demeter held her daughter, her heart overflowing with relief. The barren fields began to bloom once more, the earth awakening with vibrant life at the touch of Persephone's feet. Flowers burst into color, trees blossomed, and the warmth of spring returned. The mortals rejoiced, their prayers of gratitude reaching the heavens. Demeter looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with love. "I will never let you go again," Demeter vowed, holding Persephone close. But as they walked through the blooming fields, Persephone felt a weight in her heart, a promise she had made, and a bond she could not break. Chapter 8. As they returned to their home, Demeter noticed something different about Persephone, a change, a weight she couldn't quite place. When Persephone revealed that she had eaten the pomegranate seeds, Demeter's face fell, her joy turning to worry. "Oh, Persephone," Demeter said, her voice trembling, "you have bound yourself to the underworld. For each seed you ate, you must spend a month with Hades." Persephone nodded, her heart heavy. "I will stay with him for part of the year, Mother. But I will always return to you." Demeter sighed, her heart aching at the thought of losing her daughter again, even if only for a part of the year. But she knew there was no changing what had been done. "We will make the most of the time we have," Demeter said, her voice resolute. "When you are here, the world will bloom, and when you must return, we will wait for you." Persephone smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I love you, Mother." Chapter 9. The world shifted as the seasons began to change. When Persephone was with her mother, the earth flourished, flowers bloomed, trees bore fruit, and the warmth of spring and summer spread across the land. But when Persephone returned to the underworld, the earth grew cold, and winter settled in, the world waiting for her return. Hades welcomed Persephone back to his realm, his heart warming at her presence. He treated her with kindness, giving her space to roam and make her own choices. Over time, Persephone grew to appreciate the stillness of the underworld, the quiet beauty that lay within its depths. "I have missed you," Hades admitted one evening, as they walked through the garden of the underworld, the pale flowers glowing faintly in the darkness. "And I have missed the quiet," Persephone said with a soft smile. "There is something here that I can't find in the world above." Hades looked at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "Perhaps in time you will find a way to belong to both worlds." Persephone nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. She realized that her journey was not about choosing between two worlds, but about finding a balance, about being a part of both, and bringing her light to each in turn. Chapter 10. Persephone's time in the underworld came to an end, and it was time for her to return to the surface. Hades watched as she prepared to leave, his heart filled with both sadness and hope. "I will see you again," Persephone said, her eyes meeting his. "The cycle will continue, and I will return." Hades nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "I will be here, waiting for you." As Persephone emerged into the world above, she was greeted by her mother's embrace, the warmth of the sun on her face. The fields bloomed once more, and life returned to the earth. Persephone knew that her journey was not just between two places, but a bridge between life and death, between growth and rest. And as she lay in the meadows, feeling the warmth of her mother's love, she thought of Hades, waiting in the underworld. She knew she would return, and with each turn of the seasons, her journey would continue, a story without end. Persephone looked to the horizon, the sun setting in a blaze of color. She knew that her journey was not just her own, but part of something greater, a cycle that would continue, bringing life, death, and rebirth to the world. The end, for now.